Hi, my dear Astro family. So here is part two of my Saturn Neptune survival guide. So I made a part one video where I went through the seven visible planets. So in this video, we are going to be focusing on the outer planets, as well as the nodes and Chiron. But I would like to ask a question. Would you like me to make a video about the five or six major asteroids as well? Well, when it comes to the five major asteroids, I'm talking about Ceres, Pallas Athene, Juno. Potentially, I can talk to you about Black Moon Lilith as well, because usually that's an interest to people. And of course, we can be looking at Australia as well, which is one of the biggest asteroid anyway. So do let me know in the chat box below if that would be an interest of yours. But also, I would like to invite you to like this video so that we can help the algorithm reach as many people as possible so that we can share this knowledge because I think this survival guide is very useful for many people so that you can get ready for it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I would be very grateful. But now let's get going of what is going on with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and then transiting Uranus. So I'm just going to be leaving the planets involved in the chart. Here you go. So as you can see, Saturn-Neptune conjunction is in the sign of Aries, and what happens if it triggers your natal Uranus? So most likely it can be an opposition or a square. Depending on your age, if you are around 77, 78 years old, then Uranus can be in the sign of Aries as well. So in case I'm going to be touching base on that too. So Uranus is where you are weird, where you need to practice independence, but also where sudden changes can happen in your life. So it looks like when Uranus gets hit by Saturn and Neptune, your independence is going to get tested. Maybe you have been a freelancer for years, doing things your own way, and imagine that there is this new regulation or a heavy responsibility forces you to join, for example, a formal institution. And Saturn, on one hand, demands your unique brilliance to actually produce something tangible. You know, if you have been just different for the sake of it, Saturn will make that feel lonely or unproductive until you build a structure for it. You know, so this can really talk to us about turning your hobby or even your rebellion into a legitimate business. And also, it asks you to accept that some rules are necessary to protect your freedom. But this might be asking you not to quit your job just because you feel bored. You know, that could be the shadow side of this transit. Don't fight authority just to prove a point because you likely lose the round. However, you know, the Neptunian part is that maybe you have been very much of a rational thinker, and this can give you really a spiritual awakening, or even a period of confusion where, you know, something the old is no longer satisfy you. It's a little bit like a ghost in the machine type of archetype, really. You know, with Uranus, we are unique, and then it begins to dissolve into this sense of being part of everything else. And that's the Neptunian part. So this is still asking you to explore your unconventional part, the unconventional spirituality, for example. Allow yourself to not know who you are for now, for a while, but it is asking you to figure that out. Now, of course, with Saturn. You know, one of the things that could be happening here is, let's say if you have got Uranus either in Capricorn or Libra, well, that could really, it's a tension either way. You know, while Saturn would like a stable life, Uranus wants to be authentically the truest version of the self. So imagine, let's say, if you have got Uranus in the sign of Libra, means that you were born somewhere around 1968, 1969. Or if you have got Uranus in the sign of Capricorn, then you were born around 88, 89. So if Uranus is in Libra, there might be a relational wall there. And then Saturn forces you to look at your partnership. Maybe you've tried to keep the peace, but now you feel suffocated in that. And maybe you want to change the rules of your marriage or a business partnership or a contractual agreement. But Saturn is kind of bringing you the bill or bringing you the heavy responsibility that makes that kind of like walking difficult. Because with Uranus, Saturn is trying to chain Uranus up, really, and Uranus is trying to break away from that chain. Now, if Uranus is in the sign of Capricorn, it's kind of like you being in a corporate cage. Then it is asking you to be an innovator in your field, maybe to become self-employed. But there is a system here that potentially clamping you down. You may feel like, you are a cog in a machine. You want to rebel, you want to quit, but you have got the mortgage or you have got a reputation to protect or you want to become a parent and so forth. So it feels like that you are somehow stuck. And of course, Saturn, Uranus together is kind of like the structured rebellion. So of course there is a current structure and you need the autonomy as well. So we're gonna have to be able to negotiate that. But you might want to be upgrading your professional skills, for example, to match the modern technology, for example. But I would say not to burn the bridge immediately just because you are frustrated. What if you kind of build a ladder? It also invites you not to ignore the rules, because Saturn will penalize you for kind of like cutting the corners. Now, if you have got Libra Uranus, it means that you are somewhere around age 42. And this is what they call as the midlife crisis. So it's kind of like, who am I? Uranus in Libra is that 70s generation. So, I mean, it doesn't mean that you are actually 42 years old. Actually, you are more than that. But imagine this Saturn Neptune opposing Uranus as kind of like a midlife crisis type of scenario. So, what Saturn does here is a reality check. It is a reality check about your partnership, about your competitors. Imagine that people are acting like the boss of you. And you want to be breaking away from this. You want to break free from people pleasing. And you realize that your independence was actually just you reacting what others wanted from you. And then you can get tired of that. Now, Neptune is, it's a bit of a spiritual midlife crisis there. And then you might just want to see the beautiful side of the Libra. Like we have a nice house, we've got a balanced marriage. It is like a movie set, but somehow it might not feel real. Or you might find yourself attracted to someone unconventional or mystical or spiritual, someone who represents the freedom you think you lost. And then maybe you become a bit jealous of that. So either way, an opposition acts like a mirror. Everything you suppressed to fit in is now being projected onto you by other people, or you're gonna have this desire to go after that freedom. So maybe this is a time to seek therapy or coaching to actually figure out who you are. Apart from that role, like as a spouse, or a parent that you have taken on. Somehow this is asking you to be radically honest in your relationship. But of course, we can start blaming our partner for boredom as well. But it's your transit, not theirs. So that's a bit of a reminder there. I mean, imagine that, you've spent 15 years making clients happy, and now Saturn Neptune comes around, and Maybe that client sues you or a partner demands more time from you. And instead of just fixing it like you would usually do, you realize that you actually hate this business entirely. And let's say the Saturnian move would be that I'm going to hire a manager to handle the client so they can, they can just, someone to focus on that. And the Neptunian move would be that I'm going to take a sabbatical and I'm going to be, I don't know, painting in Italy because somehow what I'm doing right now is soul crushing and I'm going to have to be able to figure out what is actually happening in my life. So remember with Saturn Neptune, we are building a dream. And the dream here is somehow to be free, to be an unapologetic version of yourself. Now let's move on to our next planet, and that's Pluto. And most likely, again, the squares or the oppositions that are actually possible for you. But it looks like it's a total system reboot. That's exactly what's going to be happening here for you. Now, um, it's a little bit like an unmovable object, or we've got this irresistible force. This is an extreme period of pressure where you might need to be able to prove your resilience. Pluto is the power struggle, especially if it's in the sign of Libra. Then it means that you were born somewhere around 1971, 1972, really. And maybe you have got you have been very diplomatic, you're trying to keep things balanced. It can indicate a legal battle, a heavy divorce, a massive professional audit can be occurring in your life. And Pluto is about destroying something. So there is a system that is being rebuilt here. It's a bit of a test of integrity as well. Imagine this as a heavy lifting. If there is a debt to pay or a rule you broke, then you're going to have to face it head on, basically. In this time, I would say that it's not about over explaining things. Often it's just the result speaking here. And maybe this is also asking you, if Pluto is in the sign of Libra, that you cannot just charm your way out of a problem. You're going to have to be able to tackle it. However, this is a fear that can turn into paranoia as well. Remember, Saturn wants you to be a master, not a victim. But with Saturn in Neptune previously, many of us would have played the role of the victim as well. Now, if you have got Pluto in the sign of Capricorn, then it means that somewhere you were born around um, somewhere in the 19 at the end of 80s, the 90s. So, your power most likely is very tied to your career, to the status. And now Saturn comes around and then hits this empire that we have built. So this might be asking us to come up with a 5-year career plan. Where do I see myself in 5 years and how I'm going to get there? You might lose a position as an authority figure, or you realize that the ladder that you have been climbing is actually kind of like leaning against the wrong wall. So this is or imagine a project that you have been working on is failing and it says we're gonna have to kill it. You're gonna have to kill it yourself before Saturn does it for you. Of course, with Neptune, it's very easy to blindly follow something, blindly following this power source, but it might be something that actually drains us. So, however, we might not need to force a power move right now because it can backfire. And also it says that you're gonna have to watch out for physical burnout. because Saturn, Pluto, Neptune together is kind of like a deep exhaustion. So you might be tired of the burden of your career, of your relationship, and so forth. And then we would like to move on. Now, in that case, I would say that thank God Neptune is part of it because it is making it's not a crash if Neptune is part of it. It's more about dissolving of that power base very slowly. Now, at the beginning, it's very confusing. It's a bit of an ego death type of transit, actually. But if you have got, again, Pluto in the sign of Libra, maybe you thought you knew who you were in relation to others. And then the boundaries start to vanish. You might feel kind of like gaslit by people you thought you had them or they influenced your life, or maybe you have had secret tactics that no longer work, or you can feel this sudden weakness as well, or I'm kind of like fading away. Maybe it's about you not caring to win anymore. You don't want to fight anymore, or something that is terrifying in your life, but are you terrified of your own strength? This is a period of time when you'll have to let the old version of your power to kind of dissolve, or we're going to have to make it stronger somehow. And maybe this is also an invitation to forgive yourself or to be able to forgive others as well. So, of course, if Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn, for example, now that's a parental archetype. So maybe we're going to have to be able to forgive our parents. Yes, this could talk to us about having to say goodbye to these parents as well. Now, if Pluto is in the sign of Capricorn, maybe we have to be defining what success and control mean in your life, or do I do something meaningful? Maybe this is about you wanting to reach the top and then you are so close to it, and then you kind of realize that, wow, this is not real. Yes, it gives me the money, it gives me the title, I'm in control of my life, but somehow it still feels like it's a lie. So maybe you feel like that you are spiritually sabotaging, or certain things in your subconscious ruins something in your life, and then you just want to start working on that. It is about you realizing your mission, and then you realizing that I can actually achieve this. Um, so I can imagine, that you are somewhere, 50, 55 years old, and maybe you are part of a law firm, and maybe a major client leaves, and someone challenges you as an authority figure. Now, Saturn is going to say that what's the point in fighting this associate? Um, Maybe I'm deciding to try to create more of a solid structure that is going to be protecting my reputation or my relationship. And then Neptune says, okay, I actually hate the law. I'm going to leave this partnership. I'm starting something completely new. I'm going to put my power somewhere else where it's going to get more appreciated. So, if you have got Pluto getting triggered, most likely you are somewhere around 55 years old. So, that's the Pluto in Libra generation. So, I would say that a lot of things can be happening in the world as well, and then we can get worried, we can get paranoid, like a little bit paranoid that, oh, what if my contractual agreement is going to dissolve in a way. It feels like for you it's a bit of an end of the illusions of security. I mean, at age 55, this generation is kind of like looking at the horizon and realizing that the old world rules for the retirement or the power are kind of like dissolving. And then we can get worried about that. I mean, imagine that you have been doing something for 30 years and, you have got the 401k, you've got the pension plan, and, you have got a specific idea of what the end of the road looks like. But these global shifts, Pluto is in Aquarius currently, right? With the Saturn Neptune conjunction, it feels like that. Oh wow, my future is kind of like written with a disappearing ink. So I don't know what next is for me. That's where the worry could be coming from. Or you are feeling like you have got physical limits somehow, or you can even feel like that I'm kind of like fading away, I'm getting old somehow, and then maybe you realize that I have to work longer than I planned, and I cannot retire, and so forth. So with the Neptunian element, that's the fog of uncertainty. That's an existential anxiety about what is real, what am I gonna do, where am I gonna fit in, into this new system. But the good thing is, Pluto is the phoenix bird. So instead of feeling that loss of control over your legacy, over your evolution, this is forcing you to find power inside yourself and to to not to feel too old and not to feel that kind of like lost or not to bury yourself basically. So diversify your power. Don't just rely on one stream of income or one identity. Learn something new because Pluto is currently in the sign of Aquarius. So modern skills will keep you relevant somehow. Saturn rewards cold hard numbers. So we have to audit our finances. Um, with Neptune, it's easy to tune out, with substances or denial. So there's a reminder here to stay awake. It somehow says, especially if you have got Pluto in Capricorn, that the structures that worked, for example, in the 90s, when let's say you started your career, are dead. That's an old power. We are in a new world, and that old power somehow will fail. So that's the Plutonian element. Now let's move on to the nodes. So, I mean, um, oh, sorry, before we do the nodes, actually, we should do Neptune. Okay, so I'm just gonna leave Saturn and Neptune on. So if Neptune gets hit in your chart, um, what's very interesting is that transit Neptune is involved, and your natal uh, Neptune is involved as well. Right? So what really happens here is that there is a double Neptunian element. And I would call it as a manifestation portal for you. It's really where your long-held visions kind of like gets this roadmap from Saturn and that little soul spark. So, what really comes to my mind is the song Somewhere. Somewhere over the rainbow. So I guess we all remember that song, right? But this is Aries right now, and it is really telling us that it's not somewhere over the rainbows and stuff like that. It's right here and right now. And so the dream, let's say moving abroad or writing a book or, I don't know, starting a spiritual practice, it shouldn't be a dream anymore. It should become a reality. These dreams are maybe big or philosophical or somehow, like you want to be expanding. So imagine that Saturn, currently, who is like a project manager for your soul, It stops the daydreaming, and in Saturn in Aries, we're gonna have to figure out what the first physical step is. It's kind of like moving from I wish to I am here and I can do it. I really feel like the Neptune connection is about retuning. Your old ideas now are being updated, and potentially you might realize that you have been running away from from somewhere. So now that Aries element is about courage. The courage to be yourself exactly where you are, who you are, and whatever you want. It's a shift from believing to knowing. So maybe imagine that you are again 55 years old, and instead of that like idea of like sitting on the beach retirement, that's a bit of an old Neptunian dream. This is about an active retirement. So I'm going to start a foundation, I'm going to start a business, I'm going to start a physical challenge. That's all Aries like activities. So this is about building a creative spiritual vision. And then Saturn says, okay, let's buy the equipment. Let's register an LLC. Let's sign up for a certification. Saturn wants the bones of that dream to be super solid. And Aries says, don't sit around. Don't wait for a partner. Don't wait for an approval. Don't wait for a sign from the universe, because you are the sign. You have to take the lead on your own life. But remember, this is physical. So it shouldn't be too spiritual. Like imagine that, it's like yoga or martial art or building something with your own hands. But it shouldn't be too mystical because it might fail somehow. However, don't let the fire burn out either. Aries energy is the sprint, is the spirit, and but Saturn demands a marathon. So you cannot just quit after the first week of that new dream because it's harder than you imagined. Don't become this kind of spiritual tourist with this, kind of jumping from one philosophy to another. So this is about picking one path and then going on that path. And that's not easy with the double Neptunian element because we can have a lot of visions at the same time. It's a bit of floaty aspect. And Saturn in Aries is gonna, drag you back. It wants you to stay in your own body. But it's about dreams. It's about the bigger picture. This can really bring you growth, but it requires immediate action. It requires courage. Often with Neptune, we just talk. Being all talk and no talk. I mean, no walk. So the Aries can become a bit too impulsive and aggressive. So we're going to have to balance that out. But this is about the philosophy of your own life. Maybe you have always dreamt of living in a different culture, but life got in the way. So, because Neptune is the planet of blaming, how long are you going to blame life for something? Because Aries wants you to take action right now. This wants you to see the reality right in front of you. It can also feel like that I've been losing my mind. But it's the inner visionary within you. It's kind of like meeting that soldier. Get those high ideas, something that you have believed in for the last, I don't know, 50 years or 10 years or 5 years, and then, you know, put some boots on them, basically. Um, Now, of course, it can be a opposition as well. I mean, if Neptune was in the sign of Libra, then you were born somewhere around 1942, 1943. So I'm guessing, that's going to be just a rare example of that. Most of you are going to be having Neptune in the Capricorn who is watching, and then you were roughly born around 1984. So, that's on one hand, it's like either it's the baby boomers who gonna get hit, or that late stage professionals, age 70 and plus. With the opposition, that's a bit of a peace and love and the balanced partnership and the ideal of my youth phase, the harsh individualistic reality of this 2026. It's a bit of a fairness as well. Like maybe you have spent your life believing that if I was nice or well balanced, or then the world would treat me fairly as well. And actually, now that transiting Saturn Neptune stands opposite your ideas. You might have imagined, for example, that around age 70, yes, I'm going to be able to retire, and the government is going to take care of me. Uh, and you might feel like bullied a little bit by the world, that people have lost their manners, or you might feel that your social standing or your long-term marriage is fading, or kind of like under attack by these new forces. The Aries transit again demands you to be a little bit more self-centered. It's about you creating those boundaries, even if it feels rude. Of course, if Neptune is in the sign of Capricorn, which means that somewhere you are around age 30, 32-ish, then, maybe you were told that if you worked hard, climbed the ladder, and, followed the Capricorn structure, that you would be safe now. But now the reality, which is Saturn, and Neptune, which is the disillusion in Aries, are squaring that dream. It can be basically a career-based existential crisis. The like the structures you trusted, banks, governments, corporations, it can feel like they are somehow leaking. And you can feel this urge to kind of quit it all and start something radically kind of solo. What's that gonna be, But it's a power shift fear as well. Because what if the system I'm working for doesn't exist by the time I need it? So there's an anxiety with this Neptune. We can have an anxiety about old age and the retirement and the long-term stability as well. It can feel like that the industry that I have been working on is kind of like dying. Or so that's why we're gonna have to build up that solo ship, the freelance, the niche expertise, or something like that. Maybe this is also asking you to look at how much of your happiness is tied to a title, because that's Capricorn. Maybe it's about you having to realize that the company you're working for is kind of like failing, or they are lacking a sense of loyalty. Maybe you feel like that you are getting scammed somehow by work, making you tired, you don't get the pay, and so forth, and then I just want to walk out of it. I mean, when if Neptune is in the sign of Libra, it's kind of like the ideal, the ideal is that we are all in this together. But actually, Saturn Neptune says I'm going to have to be able to stand on my own 2 feet from now on. So this could be a loss of a partner, a loss of a parent. If it's squaring Capricorn, Neptune, thinking that, oh, the system will provide, I had a safe job, for example. And then we realize that that system is somehow a ghost. So, maybe you have been working on building that secure life for a while now, and then, like I said, the industry is shifting. Maybe you feel like that you can get outsourced by tomorrow. So what's the next step again? I think it's also the death of the 9 to 5 dream. You know, the fog could be lifting here, and then you're realizing that the mountain that you have been climbing, it's actually kind of like a quicksand. So you're gonna have to be able to build your own mountain, basically. Now let's move on to the nodes. Obviously, the nodes can be in all four signs at the same time because they are faster moving planetary energies. So, what happens if we have got an Aries Libra nodal axis? This is about, then you were born somewhere around 1986, 1988-ish, I would say. Then you are experiencing somehow a nodal opposition and return as well at the same time. But it's somehow kind of like a divorce from the past. You know, we have been working on finding the perfect balance or relying on others, or obviously you've been trying to figure out your direction. Or maybe you have been this warrior who is actually burning out right now, if we have got the South Node in the sign of Aries. So Saturn again demands you to pay the bill for your past relationship habits. Neptune makes your old way of connecting kind of feel empty. And maybe you are forced to stand alone now and then to realize that independence is actually good and it's okay sometimes to be alone. Being alone doesn't mean that I'm lonely. So somehow this power from the couple or the team is kind of like moving towards this individual path. So again, this is about figuring out who we are, what we want, and aligning with who we are, just like when no one is watching us. Um, often with Saturn, we have to be able to say no. So if we have got the node somewhere in the sign of Libra, then we're going to have to be able to say no to our partner. Neptune might tempt you to just disappear, for example, from responsibilities or just walking out of something. But Saturn is telling us that we're going to have to do this with clarity. We're going to have to have integrity about it. This is also telling you that no one is going to come to save you. When if you've got Aries nodal hit, it's about you having to save yourself. And then if you've been relying on others with having codependency issues, then this is going to be very real about it. Now, if you have got the nodes in the Cancer Capricorn axis, then I would say that again, the North Node is in Capricorn. That's very ambitious or very public, while the Cancerian part is very private and emotional. So this is going to be a square, which is forcing a sudden change in how you balance work and home. So there could be a sudden shift in world power or in the industry, or your industry makes your current home life or career path kind of like unsustainable. You might feel like you are being forced to choose between your legacy or your peace of mind or your family, for example. And maybe you realize that security was an illusion. So I have to make a choice which path I go towards. This is about, I'm not, it's kind of like I'm not going to be working from an old playbook anymore. I'm going to throw that out. I'm going to kind of build a better version, a faster version of my life. So things can get accelerated here. Square is sometimes exhausting. So maybe we have to be scheduling some Saturnian time from time to time, basically, because we don't want it to turn out or turn this into a burnout. But surely it says we shouldn't be clinging to the old way. If a door closes, um, don't try to like lock it, basically. Walk through or look for the side doors in a way. So if the North is in the sign of Aries, I think the old comfort zone is that we might have been hiding in partnerships. And now the Aries pushes that you have to lead and you have to get out of the way. And the lesson here is that you have to be courageous about it. If the North is in the sign of Libra, then it's about being too aggressive. That's the old comfort zone, most likely. And now I'm going to have to find that spiritual peace within myself. And this is telling us that your true power is within the self or in certain type of wise cooperations. If Northern is in the sign of Capricorn, then the old comfort zone is safety and emotionality. So we're going to have to build something that lasts. And emotional security might be coming from your competence right now. And if you've got Northern in the sign of Cancer, the old comfort zone is ambition, workaholism. So I think the push here is that we're going to have to soften our hearts a little bit. It is telling us that success is empty without a soul to share it with someone else. Um, you know, it's about sometimes trying to navigate being the CEO of the family and an office as well at the same time. And a square usually is when we are at a crossroad in our life. So either I fail as a parent, or I fail as a partner, or I fail as a boss. So imagine that you are stepping down, for example, because having to take care of your parents and stuff like that. It's about moving towards your north node, for example, in the sign of Cancer. And I'm going to downsize the house. I'm going to focus on the internal world. Or it's a little bit like the checkmate moment for the ego. The universe is not trying to punish you. It's trying to stop you from going the wrong way for potentially another 18 years. The path can look foggy, with Neptune. So this is not, in Aries, it's not about running for it. We need the clarity first. But Saturn will show you the very first step that you should be taking. What's very interesting, I read this on my YouTube channel actually, that, oh, Viktor, I've got, let's say, Mars in the sign of Aries, but I started feeling this a couple of years ago. Is that possible? Absolutely. Because Saturn and Neptune co-witnessed each other in the sign of Pisces. Think of that as an incubation phase. But now that Saturn Neptune conjunction in Aries is kind of like the execution phase. For the last 3 years, while Saturn and Neptune were co-witnessing in Pisces, it was a little bit like an internal landscape there. It was dissolving all structures within us. We were grieving what was lost, dreaming of what could have been or what could be. You know, Pisces is passive, reflective, sometimes confusing. But now we are in Aries. That's a fire sign. So that's about actionable fire. So we are moving from this vision towards a action. 2023, 2025, we were dreaming. We realized that the old power, old dreams weren't enough. Um, but it was just a feeling through the dark. I think it caused a lot of fatigue, a deep sense of something is coming, but I don't know what. We started feeling that change, but we are now in a doing phase. It's with a big bang, it's a 0 degree. Aries doesn't ask for a permission, it acts. So the dreams you had during the Pisces transit are now being born into that physical world of yours. So maybe in the last few years, we have been thinking that, I could leave this corporate job and just create, you know, or, or consult on my own terms, or I can be self-employed or something like that. So stop wishing, register that domain, hire that coach, go to a school, whatever house system, or whatever house it is actually, falling, falling in your chart. Now, last but not least, let's have a look at Chiron. So, what happens when Saturn, Neptune hits natal Chiron? So, if Chiron is in Aries, then you are again the 70s generation, and that might be about the right to exist. Like I don't have the right to exist, or I have to fight for every inch or space you take up. Now, Saturn and Neptune hit your natal Chiron, so this is kind of like a second puberty age. So it doesn't allow you anymore that you are not good enough, you know. Saturn is the reality check. I'm capable. And the Neptune dissolves that old shame, that old pain. You are not a wounded warrior anymore. This is about you becoming a mentor. This is about owning your own scars. Yes, we made mistakes in the past. We even failed. But you can use these credentials. And the credential is that you survived. So it's a second chance type of transit, at least for me, from a very positive point of view. Yes, you might go for a surgery, you might go for a physical therapy. You might go and then fix Aries injuries like head, face, teeth, scars, and all those type of stuff. But the most important thing that Chiron in Aries is teaching you as a native, that stop saying I can't. Saturn says you must. There's a pain here, and then you can channel that into a new project. Now, if you have got an opposition, that means Chiron is in the sign of Libra. So, maybe it's the wound around the others that you felt rejected. You had to sacrifice of who you are to be able to be loved. Now, maybe relationships feel like they are kind of, when salt is being rubbed in the wound. So that could be a partner, that could be a legal situation, that could be anyone pretty much in the world, but they are making me feel weak. So it's the realization that they are not going to heal me. I can only heal myself. I exactly know where this pain is. Others just guessing. So I'm not seeking approval anymore. I'm going to be respecting myself. I'm going to be respecting my decision. It is about you doing something alone that scares you. If a relationship has been draining you for years, I think Saturn is going to bring the cold reality and then going to make you walk away or at least restructure it. But no more people pleasing. Stop trying to balance the scale all the time because that might tip against you. Or don't try to fix a person, for example, who is not willing to work on it. Because again, that scale will tilt against you. So if you've got, Chiron in Aries, then it means that I'm not enough. That's the wound there. And you have to be the first one to try something new. If it's Chiron in Libra, I'm only whole with you. Well, standing alone is just as fine. That's the teaching there. Maybe you have been just this helper, but you felt somehow invisible in your entire life. And maybe it also can feel like that I have wasted many of my years on a project, on this person, on this family, and so on. Now, of course, Chiron can be in the sign of Cancer, um, or Capricorn as well. So with this is highly possible with any of the positions really, because Chiron takes about 50 years to go around the zodiacal circle. So if Chiron is in the sign of Cancer, there is a wounded nest there. The wound is around belonging, family, a parent. Maybe you have been trying to build this very safe emotional shell. Actually, now this transit in a fire is gonna start burning that shell. So it says that we cannot hide behind this shell anymore. Yes, it can indicate family crisis, property issues, homesickness. Um, you can feel like that you are not safe anymore. No one is loving you, no one is nurturing you. But it teaches you that the safety is it's not a place, it's not a person. Sometimes it's about boundaries. It's something that I can create for myself. So maybe you have to be setting some boundaries with family members who drain you. But maybe you have to do the inner child work as well. Burning away some old family scripts because they no longer serve me. Cancer is the crab and it wants to hide. But if you hide now, imagine this Aries fire is gonna find you. So it's better to go against the fire and then put it out. Basically, it's facing the issue. Maybe it's time to say no. Like I'm not gonna save everyone else at the expense of my own energy. And if Chiron is in Capricorn, that's the one is around competence or again a parent or an authority figure in our life. Maybe you have been spending a lifetime to try to prove that you are enough, and then you've been working hard and you're trying to get these titles. But this could be a sudden blow to your reputation. It could be a realization that I have achieved many things in my life and I still feel inadequate. Or it could be sadness as well that I haven't achieved anything. Or it could be a massive pressure to start over again. And I'm terrified to lose a status, something that I worked so hard for. But it's no more external validation. This is more about an internal mastery. It's about finding a mission that matters to you and not necessarily caring about what looks good on my resume. It's potentially about you becoming an entrepreneur, really. If you lose a position of power, which is possible with this, I think don't let it destroy your identity. Just look at it as an opportunity that I can start fresh. With Chiron in Cancer, it was about the fear of abandonment, the lack of roots. Okay, what if I build my own emotional fortress then? What if I'm reparenting myself? And then with Chiron in Capricorn, it's the fear of failure. Um, And what if I wasn't afraid and I went towards something that I have been kind of like wanting? So, guys, this is another survival guide for you. I really hope it helps. And in the future, I'm planning to do more of these, like with these bigger transits, like Uranus moving into the sign of Gemini, we're gonna do this so that you can have a very better understanding how it might affect you psychologically. Remember, the tip that I would give is that yes, you have got Aries cusp somewhere in your chart, and there are 12 possibilities. So I'm only able to kind of describe a bit of the archetype, but you're gonna have to put it into that area of life where the Saturn Neptune conjunction takes place. So do let me know in the chat box below where that is, because I'm really curious to hear your experiences as well. And also, it's not just 12 scenarios, because of course, when you look at these planets in your natal chart, they rule a particular part of like it rules a house, basically. So, but I would always look at where they come from. Because imagine this is kind of like a landlord and the tenant type of scenario. And when you're a tenant, you are kind of like the boss of that house. You do whatever you want in your house, right? Within a contractual agreement, of course. So it's a little bit more complex. I can really give you just archetypical meanings, and then you're gonna have to be um, decoding the rest. But if you need a bit of a decoding session, then you can book a reading with me. So go on my website and then we can check it together, and surely I can guide you with that. So remember, you've got a bit of a homework. Would you like me to prepare a part 3 video on this with the 5 major asteroids and Lilith? Or what asteroid would you like me to look at? Because then I might be able to give some hints and tips for you guys. So thank you very much for being here, and I will see you next week. Take care. Bye bye.